Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another wonderful Miss Brown Presents. This time on Miss Brown Presents, we're going to talk about the Cherokee. Now, the Cherokees are an American Indian group that live in North Carolina. We've talked about them a little bit this week, but now we're going to get really in depth on their way of life. Now, this book is a bit long, so we're not going to read the whole thing. Instead, I'm going to pick parts of it that we're going to talk about. So our story starts out with this young girl who is wandering around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And as she walks around, so it's going to be somewhere up in here. This is, by the way, this is over here is where the Cherokee live today on the reservations. And if you don't know what that word means, we'll get to it later on. So this girl here is walking around. She finds an arrowhead. Now, fact number one that you need to know is that the Cherokee Native Americans used stone weapons. All right? They did not have metal. And here, let me just make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see this. All right, so they did not have metal weapons back during this time period that we are talking about. This the colonial times. It's the times before America was a country, into the early years of America being a country. So they did not have metal weapons. Okay, that is the first thing I want you to understand. They used stone weapons such as flint arrowheads, which is what this girl found. She found a flint arrowhead on the ground. So back to our story, and I will pause this as needed. I will also leave this up here. So just take your notes. I really want you to take these notes down, ladies and gentlemen, because you will be tested on this. So, back over to our story. All right. This girl here picks up a flint arrowhead, and a ranger comes to talk to her. Now, the ranger is a Cherokee, half Cherokee, according to the story. She is an American Indian. So her name is Anna Highcloud, which honors her Cherokee, her American Indian heritage. All right. And so Debbie, our little girl, that's the little girl's name, asks the ranger to tell her about what life was like for the Cherokee. So now we're getting into the meat of the story. All right. We're going back in time, ladies and gentlemen. There is a bank of a river nearby. So imagine you have this river area. All right, there are about 50 houses that are made out of tree branches and mud. They look like big, round, upside down baskets. All right. So they built their houses out of tree branches and mud. All right. I'll give you a second to write that down. All right. Moving along. And yes, I'll leave that up if you still need to keep writing. All right. So more than 100 people lived in this village. Okay, it's about one of 200 Cherokee villages in North Carolina and a few other states around us. All right, there were more than 20,000 Cherokee people divided into 7 large clans or groups. So the Cherokees had 7 large clans. The clans are groups within the Cherokee people. So basically, if you might imagine, we pretend our school is the Cherokees. So we might have a clan that's made up of fourth graders, and then a clan made up of the third graders, and then a clan made up of the second graders and the first graders and the kindergartners, and then a clan made up of the pre-K, and a clan made up of the office staff, and a clan made up of the cafeteria workers and custodians, and so they're all still part of the same thing. Just like we're all still part of the same school, they're all part of the Cherokee Nation. But these clans just kind of broke it down a little bit. Just like the United States is broken down into states, one big country broken down into 50 states, the large group of Cherokee are broken down into different clans. Okay? So whatever metaphor, whatever way of thinking about it is easier for you, go with that one. All right? So the Cherokees lived in this area for about 600 years. This is back in the 1600s. So they lived for about 600 years in this area up until the 1600s, in the 1700s. And we'll talk about what happened then in a minute. So they moved down from the north. They come down. Okay? They live here now in North Carolina. All right. Now, the names that they don't actually call themselves the Cherokee. The Cherokee was a name given to them by another American Indian tribe, the Creeks. They called them, the Creeks actually called the Cherokee a word in their language, which means people who speak differently. So, in other words, the Europeans that came over and trying to find out the names of different tribes, they mixed up the names. The Cherokee actually call themselves the principal people. Of course, they would say it in their language, which I do not have here off the top of my head, but I will show you in class what that is in the actual Cherokee language. Because if you remember, we talked about it today in class about the alphabet and the written language for the Cherokee, although that's going to be a spoiler for this book, so we're going to hold off there. So far, they use stone weapons. Okay, we're not talking about metal. Don't imagine, rifles, anything like that. All right, stone, wood, flint. Okay. Then they built their houses out of tree branches and mud. They had 7 large clans, and the clans are the groups within the Cherokee's whole nation, the whole tribe, the whole people. And they called themselves the principal people. All right. So that's our recap for right now. Now, the jobs in the village. Men hunted. Older children, so, you guys, my students, would pick plants, berries. I'm going to scroll this down a little bit. And the woman farmed. Oops, sorry, misspelling there. Typing faster than my fingers can. My fingers are typing faster than my brain can think sometimes. Okay, so they farmed. And then we have the 3 sisters, which is important to remember. Oops, sorry. I'm trying to keep as much of this on the screen as I can. The three sisters. These are those crops. Squash, beans, corn. All right. Now, the Cherokee here, while you're writing this down, I just want to mention that the Cherokee truly believed that the creator that they believed in, their great spirit, would see to it that they never left their land. All right. They loved living in the mountains where they are at this point in history, and they believed that they would never have to leave. As we know, things change. But before we talk about that, there's a few other things we want to talk about. So I'll give you a second to write these down. Make sure that you have this. The three sisters are important, okay? These are their main crops, their main plants: corn, beans, and squash. Okay, I'm going to move this up a little bit because we have some more writing to do. Treaties and more treaties. So, now our little girl, the little girl in the story, asks, what about war? So, the ranger replies, well, yes, there was wars. It's an important part of life for the Cherokee. The nations fought, different clans fought with each other over land and to settle disputes. And they also fought one another for glory. With, the glory of winning in battle, I guess, is the best way to put that. So, bravery, being brave in battle, showing off your battle skills and, not running from the enemy. That's how young men made names for themselves. So, the clans, or the nations, I should say, because they would also fight with other Native American tribes. Nations fought over land, settle arguments. That's what spell me real quickly. Arguments, disputes, verbal fights. Disputes are when you're arguing with somebody, when you're fighting with them with your words. So the nations fought over land, settling arguments. That should be to settle arguments. Just grammar reasons. And also for glory. But wars were limited. All right, they weren't trying to straight out destroy one another. Okay? They did fight, yes, but it wasn't for the purpose of completely destroying their enemy. They limited themselves. They weren't out to completely kill everybody in the other nation that they were fighting. So this is important. Wars were limited. All right? They are fighting for these reasons, yes, but they don't let it destroy the other nations. And then, however, the Europeans arrived and everything changed. So the Europeans started to settle in America in large, large numbers in the early 1700s. So we have tons of Europeans coming from England, Spain. Well, at this point, it's mostly England in this part of the country. So we have a ton of people from England and countries that England owns coming to North Carolina. And they decided that they didn't want to share. Basically, it was too bad, so sad for the natives peoples, for the American Indians. They decided that they didn't care that the American Indians were here first, that the Europeans didn't care that the Native or the American Indians were using the land, they were here first, that they didn't want to try to get along with them. So the Europeans, or the settlers, we'll call them, wanted land. So they wanted land. What else did they want? They wanted not to live near they didn't want to live near American Indians because the settlers, the Europeans, looked down on them because their culture, their way of life was different. And it's sad. It is really sad that they could not try to get along with them, that the Europeans could not try to get along with the American Indians. But at this point in history, the Europeans believed that their culture was the best culture, and that either you accept their culture, you can become part of their culture, part of their way of life, or they didn't want anything to do with you. Also, as we've talked about in class, they wanted gold found on the different lands. So, moving along. So the Cherokee and the other American Indian groups, but the Cherokee are the ones we're talking about now, they tried to get along with the Europeans. So they only fought when they felt like they had no other choice left, and then they signed peace treaties whenever possible. So a treaty is an agreement between two groups and usually, at least in this respect, we're talking about peace treaties. So in this respect, that the treaty is an agreement between these two groups, between the Europeans and the Cherokee, that would allow peace between them. So basically, the Europeans said, okay, if you Cherokee do this, then we'll do this, and we'll all get along and live together in peace and happiness. So the Cherokee kept signing because, like I said earlier, they really didn't want to fight. They only fought when they had felt like they had no other choice. And also, unfortunately, for the American Indians, their weapons were also outclassed by the muskets and other weapons of the Europeans. So it would not have been very good for the American Indian tribes such as the Cherokee to go and fight the Europeans. So the Cherokee signed their peace treaties, and the Europeans said, okay, if you guys just do this, then we promise to do this. Every single time, Europeans broke the peace treaty. That should be Europeans, sorry. They broke the peace treaties. All right. Basically, the Cherokee would sign the treaty saying, okay, the Europeans are going to take this chunk of their land, but you get to keep the rest, you as in the Cherokee. So the Europeans, the settlers, took this chunk of land, but the Cherokee could have the rest. And then the Europeans, the settlers, would say, oh, wait a minute, we need more land. We have too many people coming over, and we really need more land. So we're going to break the treaty we wrote with you. We're going to take another chunk of your land, but you get to keep the rest of it, and we'll sign a new treaty. Mm-mm. And then the Europeans would say, oh, wait a minute. Kind of ran out of land again. We're going to take another chunk of it, but we're going to keep the other land for you guys, and you can have it forever. And this went on and on and on. At this time, the Europeans, like I said, they didn't respect the Cherokee and the other American Indians. They saw them as lesser. They saw them as less than Europeans. They saw the American Indians as not as important in them as them. So the Europeans and their needs came first, and then whatever was left over could be given to the American Indians. Eventually, one group of Cherokee, and I am probably going to pronounce this wrong, and I do apologize, the Chickamaugas, decided we're done with these treaties. You keep breaking them. You keep lying to us. We're done. So for about 20 years, they fought the settlers and the soldiers from Europe. But they were forced to give up their land. Like I said, the Europeans had the better weapons, the better trained armies, better tactics. So the Chickamaugas fight for their land in North Carolina ended. And this was after the United States became a country, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. This is in the late 1790s. We became a country in the 1770s. So, late 1790s, this group of Cherokee are moved out to Arkansas, which was ruled by Spain. The United States got that land from Spain and then pushed them out again. So, eventually, the Chickamaugas kept going west, and then they became part of the Western Cherokees who had already settled there. And then, so after that happened, there was no more fighting. However, the Cherokee were not ready to give up just yet. So, if you ever heard of the expression, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em? That's from the text, Jess, but it's also what happened. So, if you can't win in a war, this is what the expression means. If you can't beat 'em, join 'em. It means if you can't win in a war, if you can't win in a battle, if you can't win in a physical fight, change to become like the person that you're fighting with so you can get along. So basically, I can't win in a battle against you, so I'm going to become like you so we can get along. So that is what the Cherokee tried to do. So the ones in the east tried to become more like other Americans living here at the time. They thought that if they became more like the European settlers that are now the Americans, the colonists. Remember, at this point, America has been formed, so we have an America now. So they thought if they became more like the white Americans, the colonists, that the colonists would accept them and let them keep what they had left, what little land and other things they had left. So the Cherokees became farmers. They lived like the settlers, like the colonists. They built schools, had courts. And they created an alphabet, which we talked about. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Typing way too fast today. They created an alphabet for their language. It should be created. Yeah, that might help out a little bit too. All right. All right. And they also So with that language, they wrote newspapers, books, and even a constitution for their people. If you think about it, the Constitution of the United States tells us how our government's going to be run. So their Constitution told them how the Cherokee Nation would be run. So they were very proud of everything that they had done. And they said, surely now, so now that we've done all this stuff, surely the people of the United States, those colonists, those settlers, the the people of the United States will let us have our own lives. They'll let us just live here in peace. We can live like that, live in harmony, no more issues. Well, as you probably can guess from what we talked about in class on Monday, that's not quite true. I do really want to write really quickly. Just Sequoia invented the alphabet. So I just wanted to make sure that you had that written down. Now, all right, you guys have done a really good job so far sticking out with me. So before we get into the last few pages, I have a little surprise for you. So I just need to pause my video for a second and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, apparently I can't do what I wanted to do. I was going to show you, ladies and gentlemen, my cats, but I can't, so for the moment. So what I will do is I will make a separate Miss Brown Presents video just so that you can see Magnus and Selena, because I know that you guys are really interested in seeing them, and I am really proud of you for sticking with me for this for so long, because this is a really, really long topic, and we've got a ton more left to go. And so I will pause this video in class and give you a quick couple seconds break to to catch up and show you the picture, show you the kitty cats, and then we will continue on with the lesson. But at this point, you probably need a break. Okay, moving on. Gave enough time for me to pause the video. And we will recap everything at the very end. So, if you missed anything, do not worry. I'm going to go back through all of this at the end. Okay. Moving on. Final defeat is the part of this chapter, or this part of this reading. So things don't turn out so well for the Cherokee. So our little student, or our little child main character is still talking to the ranger, and so now the ranger is saying that they're coming to the saddest part of her story. So, what happened? Well, even though the Cherokee tried to become like the other settlers, the colonists, by doing all that stuff that we talked about up here, by doing all of this, it didn't matter. In 1800, Congress, that's the part of our government that makes the law, passed the Indian Removal Act. Oh, I'm sorry, not 1800, 1830. Please forgive me for that. 1830. Sorry. All right. So this law required the Cherokee and a couple other tribes in the southeastern United States to move to the western area. Which is now Oklahoma, that area, which was back then called the Indian Territory. So this law gave the Cherokee 8 years to move to the Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. So basically, even with everything the Cherokee tried to do, even with trying to be more like the other Americans, Congress and the government didn't care. They said, "You are American Indians. We want your land. We want the gold on your land. We don't want you anywhere near us. You got 8 years to get out of here." And the Cherokee fought back, but they fought back with lawyers. All right, and they won, so to speak. They won in the Supreme Court. Cherokee won in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, which are the judges, said, "Can't do this. Can't do this. Nope, you're not going to do it." But President Andrew Jackson made them leave anyway. He basically said, "You know what? I know what the Supreme Court said, but I'm not going to help the Supreme Court follow through with what they ruled." Basically, he decided that he was not going to listen to the Supreme Court because he, like many Americans at the time, wanted the American Indians gone. He wanted their land. So they did have someone by the name of John Ross, who was 1/8 Cherokee. He was deeply committed to their cause. He was one of their chiefs. He went to talk to President Jackson. And they had this long conversation. And Ross begged, insisted, pleaded that the Indian Removal Act here was wrong. But Jackson didn't care. He wanted the Cherokees to go to the Indian Territory, and he wasn't changing his mind. So in 1838, the deadline, the time that they had to leave here, they said 8 years. So 1838, time to leave was up, and most of them had not left. Most of them have not left at this point. So, U.S. troops forced the Cherokee out of their homes in 1838. All right, I mean, mobs burned their houses, they stole their cattle, they burned their possessions. It was awful. They lost everything. Absolutely everything. They were put into temporary prisons that are called stockades. Then they were put on boats and then on trains and sent out west. And then for the last 800 miles of the journey, they had to walk. They were robbed. They didn't have any food. They got sick from being hungry. They got sick because they weren't living in very clean conditions. 4,000 died before reaching the Indian Territory. And many of the times they didn't even have time to stop and bury their dead. All right, this is a really sad time in American history. They were forced to walk hungry. Forced to walk. You're hungry and living in bad conditions. Many died. This is the Trail of Tears. All right. This is a very unfortunate part of American history. It's a very sad part of American history. And this is also, my students, why we need to talk about history so that tragedies like this are never allowed to happen again. Some of you ask me, why do we need to study history? We need to know what happened in the past in order to make the future better. That's why this part right here is very important. Now, if you can look over here at the reading for a minute. Over to this side of the screen. All right. They joined up. The Cherokee joined up with their fellows, the ones who are already out in the West, the ones who lived in Arkansas, and now Oklahoma. They joined into one big group again. So these Western Cherokees became part of the Cherokee Nation. There were 5 tribes: the Cherokees, the Creeks, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, and the Seminoles, all of which had been kicked out by the U.S. government on the Trail of Tears. So all of these groups were sent on the Trail of Tears. All right, and that's right here, right above Texas, is where they got resettled. Okay. The Indian Territory later became the state of Oklahoma, which is right above Texas. So some Cherokee had really good life. They became prosperous. That means they did really well for themselves just back in the East, but many of them just lived very simple lives. And then, unfortunately, when the Civil War started, the Cherokee sided with the South, the Confederates. Spoiler warning, the South did not win. I know, we haven't gotten to that part of the United States history yet, but the South did not win, the North won. The Union won. So the United States, the Union, was very angry about the Cherokee siding with the South. So the United States started taking away their land for railroads and to build towns. And then the government divided the land that was left of those 5 tribes into small pieces. So they only had a tiny bit of land left from the original big chunk that they were given up here. So this was broken down even more. So there's about 300,000 Cherokee living in the United States. Most live in Oklahoma. But more than 13,000 live in North Carolina. Now, they did not move back. So remember, there's 2 groups now. There's the Western Cherokee and the Eastern Cherokee. So some Cherokees hid in the mountains and stayed in North Carolina. So the Cherokee that live in North Carolina now are the descendants. Vocab word from Unit 1 of Social Studies, descendants. Think about it for a second. Do you remember what it means? That's right, children and grandchildren. It's the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren, the great-great-great-grandchildren, the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. That's a lot of greats. Of the Cherokee who hid in the mountains. So about 1,000 escaped at the time. So the government finally just gave up, said, okay, we can't find them. I mean, they looked for them for a while, but they gave up. And eventually they said, okay, you know what? Since we couldn't find you, we couldn't make you leave. This is years and years later. So they said, okay, you guys can just stay. So they're the Eastern Cherokee. So there's two groups, the Western and the Eastern. All right. In 1889, the government set aside a large portion of the Great Smoky Mountains for a Cherokee reservation. There was a reservation for the Cherokee in the Great Smoky Mountains. So that is where the reservation is a set of land, attractive land, where the Cherokee are allowed to live the way that they want to. They have their own government, they have their own laws, things like that. It's basically the United States way of saying, sorry, we took your land. Here, you can have this land back, and you can run it how you see fit. Is it the best way to make it up to them? Probably not. We took a lot more land, we as in the American people, took a lot more land from the American Indians than was given back to them as reservations. But at least the government realized they were wrong. All right, yes, still doesn't make up for the Trail of Tears and the other things that happened to the American Indians, but at this point, it is a good thing that the American Indians do have their reservations nowadays. So that ends our story because our little girl here goes back to her campsite, and one thing that she does do is she puts the arrowhead back. She leaves it on the ground. They put it down gently. Why would she do that? Well, we don't want to take things like that out of where they came from. All right, those are historical items. Yes, they're cool to look at and hold, but they're historical items, and they should be treated with respect. Okay, so that ends that reading. We're going to review over here. Using my handy dandy highlighter. I used to be able to change colors on it. Oh well. Alright. Stone weapons. That's important. Right, they built their houses out of trees and mud. 7 large clans. You know, there might be a reason why I'm highlighting these things, so maybe you should make sure that even if you didn't get everything in your notes, the things I'm highlighting might be a good idea to make sure you have written down. Alright, the 3 sisters. So we have the stone weapons, 7 large clans, the principal people, which is what the Cherokee called themselves, the 3 sisters, which are squash, bean, and corn. The nations fought over land to settle arguments and for glory. The settlers, those are the colonists, the Europeans. They wanted land, not to live near the American Indians, and gold. The Cherokees signed peace treaties. But the Europeans broke them. The Cherokee built school courts and had an alphabet. They wrote newspapers, books, and a constitution. This was all to be like the other Americans. I'm just going to put that note there. If you have a chance to write it down, do. Otherwise, that's okay. Sequoyah invented the Cherokee alphabet. Indian Removal Act. All right. President Andrew, them it was told them they had to leave. The Cherokee fought back and they won the Supreme Court, but President Andrew Jackson made them leave anyway. All right. The Trail of Tears. They were hungry. They had bad conditions. They were forced to walk. Many died. All right, they eventually broke into two groups, the Western and the Eastern Cherokee. So some Cherokees managed to hide and stay in North Carolina, and today there's a reservation for the Cherokee in the Great Smoky Mountains. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about anything that you have heard in this video, please feel free to ask me at any point. I hope you enjoyed our video, and I will have... And yes, of course, the cats. Make sure I cover that too. So you are going to have a test on this information. I hope that your notes are complete. If you're missing anything in your notes, I will go through it one last time without comments, without saying anything. Just scrolling through the notes. I will go slowly, double check. Actually, you know what? I'll read through them so you can listen and double check on your own. I'm just going to read exactly what the notes say. I am not going to add anything to them. Cherokee used stone weapons, no metal, flint arrowheads. Built houses out of tree branches and mud. Cherokees had 7 large clans, Clans are grouped within the Cherokee people. The Cherokee call themselves the principal people. Men hunted, older children picked plants and berries, women farmed. The 3 sisters were squash, bean, and corn. The nations fought over land to settle arguments and for glory, but wars were limited. Settlers wanted land, not to live near American Indians, and gold. The Cherokee signed peace treaties. A treaty is an agreement between 2 groups that would allow peace between them. Europeans/settlers broke the peace treaties. Cherokees built schools, court, and created an alphabet for their language. They wrote newspapers, books, and a constitution. And I added here, in case you forgot, all to be like other Americans. If you didn't add that, that's okay. Sequoyah invented the Cherokee alphabet. 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. This act gave the Cherokees 8 years to move to the Indian Territory, Oklahoma. Cherokee won in the Supreme Court, but President Andrew Jackson made them leave anyway. U.S. troops forced Cherokee out of their homes in 1838. They were forced to walk. They were hungry and living in bad conditions. Many died. This is the Trail of Tears. There are 2 groups, the Western Cherokee and the Eastern Cherokee. And some Cherokee hid in the mountains and stayed in North Carolina. Today there is a reservation for the Cherokee in the Great Smoky Mountains. All right. Any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this this video of Miss Brown Presents the Cherokees. Have a good day, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure your notes are complete. And well, I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.